Hello and welcome to interest.co.nz. I'm Gareth and I'm joined by Patrick Watson, who's the Senior Economic Analyst at Mauldin Economics. Patrick, look, thanks for joining us on interest.co.nz again. We obviously spoke last year in April as the COVID-19 pandemic was really getting underway. There's been a lot of water under the bridge since then, especially there in the US. Where are things at as a bit of an overview at the moment as we speak in September 2021?
Yeah, so here we are in the middle of another wave, the fourth one now, and this one is the Delta variant, which is more severe. I wrote a couple months ago that the pandemic is now optional, that if you are, as in the United States at least, the vaccines are readily available. If you choose to have it, then you're pretty safe. Not 100%, but fair, in good shape. And that's proven to be the case for those who had it. Unfortunately, a large part of the population has chosen not to for their own reasons, which I don't understand in many cases, but that is the case. So in those regions where the vaccination rates are lower, it is sweeping through and causing problems, filling hospitals almost exclusively with people who were not vaccinated. Many of these cases are very severe and death rates are starting to rise. So it is a problem for those areas. For the rest of us, life can go on pretty much as normal. Here in Texas, our government has not been very diligent about the precautions or lockdown or mask or all those sort of things. So just go around in public, other than people wearing masks, which is a minority of the public, you don't see a lot of difference. If you're in a hospital, then I think you would see a difference because they are very full. They have actually stopped doing other sort of procedures, so they have room for all the COVID patients. So that is problematic. It is starting to improve here in the South and in Texas. We're at least stabilizing, but now beginning to rise in other parts of the country. So I think we're going to be wrestling with this for a while, with just sort of rolling waves that come and go, and new variants will emerge, and we're just going to have to keep going through this and dealing with it as it happens.
Yeah, so it's very much an ongoing situation that you're describing. I guess that the hope was, as you were saying just before we started to record, that when the vaccinations came along, that this would be a silver bullet. But if there's a decent chunk of the population who won't or can't get it, then as you say, COVID will continue on its merry way and new variants will pop up. I mean, I saw today that 75% of adults in the US have now had at least one dose of a vaccine. I mean, how much higher could that conceivably get from here?
Well, it could go somewhat higher. You've got, of course, here in the United States, the vaccine is not allowed for children under 12. So that's a population that just can't get it. We're not allowed to. That approval may be coming in the next few months, but it's not here yet. Then you also have, according to the survey data, something like 20% of the adults who just say they won't get it no matter what. So, we may get to 70% of the eligible population fully vaccinated, within, maybe by year end, if all goes well. It has increased lately as the situation gets worse. That is not going to be enough, the epidemiologists say, to get us to the herd immunity that we used to hear about. So we will continue wrestling with this. At some point, it becomes, as I understand what the scientists say, it becomes what they call endemic, to where it's like the common cold, where it's just out there. Everyone has had some approach or some brush with it. We all have some degree of immunity, and it's not as problematic, but that's probably years away. So I think this may be with us for a while.
One thing that I'm interested in is we've obviously heard quite a lot about the idea of vaccination passports, which I sort of take to mean international travel between countries. I'm just wondering, within the US, I mean, obviously we hear a lot about some of the states in the South where COVID is still running amok. Notably, Florida is one we hear about a lot over here. Is there any suggestion in the States of some sort of COVID passport or travel restrictions internally between states?
Early in the pandemic, there were a number of states who closed off their borders to other states. We don't have that now that I'm aware of. I wouldn't expect that to happen again. Now, the vaccine passports for just normal life to get into restaurants or theaters or this sort of thing, that is happening in some states. New York is kind of in the lead on that. But it varies a lot by state. Here in Texas, they have actually made that against the law. So businesses are not allowed to even ask customers if they've been vaccinated or not, which to my way of thinking is crazy, but that is the law now. And I think is one reason our situation is worse here. But I think we've moved beyond many of the lockdown and business kind of restrictions. The majority of the population doesn't want them, won't cooperate with them. And for the vaccinated people, doesn't really need them. If you're just minimally cautious, if you wear a mask when you're around people, try to stay outside as much as possible, don't get in people's faces, and you're vaccinated, you're pretty safe. So life could conceivably be normal, except we keep having these other problems where people crowd into stadiums and such and don't wear masks and aren't vaccinated, and they spread it to each other, and it just keeps going on.
What about the idea of, I guess, mandatory vaccinations enforced by employers? I did see a story about Delta Airways looking at doing that. I mean, for airlines, you can understand the logic of it, obviously. What about more broadly? Is there a push in any parts of the US for this to happen?
Yes, that's becoming much more common. President Biden has ordered that for all the federal government's workers and for the military who are not already vaccinated. Many large companies are either mandating it or encouraging it by giving additional payments or other sort of incentives. So that is happening, and I think will have an effect. How much an effect, I don't know yet. Some universities are requiring it of their students. Others, in places like Texas and Florida, they're not allowed to. So it's going to be very effective some places and have almost no effect others.
It's a really interesting one, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about it. You mentioned in Texas, you're not allowed to, a business isn't allowed to say a restaurant can't say you can't come in here if you haven't had a vaccination. Other states, you mentioned New York, other states are allowing businesses to put those sorts of rules in place?
Yes, New York is doing that. In New York, they have developed a smartphone app that keeps track of your vaccination proof. You can show it wherever you go, and the restaurant can know that you are safely vaccinated, or the theater, or wherever you happen to be going. And more importantly, the other people in there can have that assurance, which is what allows businesses to get back in operation, because customers need to feel that they are safe in order to go places and spend money. So doing this is actually quite critical to get the economy back to its prior level.
This is really interesting for us because in New Zealand, we are now really beginning to ramp up our vaccination rates with 70 to 90 or 65 to 90,000 people a day now getting vaccinated, which in a country of 5 million is a lot. So it's really moving the needle quite quickly here now. But obviously, some people are not going to be able to get it and some people are going to choose not to. We're not going to get to 100%. And what you're describing in the US, it's really an economy of the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated. How challenging is this going to be going forward? Because this is probably going to be our future to some degree here in New Zealand as well.
Yes, well, it is. It is a strange sort of life. When you go out in public, and if you're in an outdoor flea market or something like that, you'll see all these people walking around, most without masks, and you don't know. You just don't know. And sometimes that's fine. If you're not near them, or you're moving, then that's probably not a problem. Now, but going to an outdoor event like a concert where you're going to be sitting with the same people for some length of time, if one of them happens to be infected, you could be in danger. So that's uncomfortable. And it's, socially, it's just awkward to ask that, right? Especially with people you don't know, because you don't know, are they going to blow up and get mad at me or without a gun and shoot me? So yeah, it is becoming sort of a social dividing line where people are closing in their circles, and you don't socialize with as many people because you don't know who you're safe with. That's difficult, especially in the context of even before COVID, we had some fairly stark social divisions in this country. So that was hard already, and now you put this on top of it, and yeah, it's hard.
It's tricky to see a path out of it in the short term too, isn't it, really? I mean, as long as the virus is still doing its thing.
Well, yeah, and it's not just us, and it's not
No.
the United States, New Zealand, or the developed world. As long as the rest of the emerging market countries have barely begun vaccinating, the virus is still out there and still doing its thing. And every time somebody catches it, that's another chance for it to evolve into something more dangerous. So it's a worldwide problem. And even if the United States and New Zealand and Canada and UK and all of us were to achieve full vaccination for everybody, that's still a problem. So yeah, I don't see a good way out of this. I wrote recently that World War II lasted, depending on the country, 4, 5, 6 years. I think this is going to last that long before it's over with. I really do.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, that's for sure. Look, we'll move on now. The infrastructure bill, obviously, this has been championed by President Biden. Has managed to overcome the partisan, I guess, divide in Washington, D.C. and be passed by the Senate. Now, you've written quite a lot about infrastructure issues highlighted by storms this year, firstly in your native Texas in the wintertime when you lost electricity and running water. Recently with Hurricane Ida in New Orleans, with power being gone, I think, for days in some cases. Is this infrastructure bill going to address these types of issues?
It will. That is still very much in the negotiation phase in Congress. So we don't know what specifics are going to be in it, when and if they pass something. In theory, it's going to have a lot of money for new highways and bridges and electric and water systems and all these sort of things, which we sorely need, and especially in the larger cities. We have a philosophical barrier of having the government make these sort of capital investments in these projects. And many of them have been delayed far too long. We have in much of Louisiana, the New Orleans area is right now without electricity because some towers fell and have to be rebuilt. Well, okay, I understand a hurricane's going to blow down your electric towers, but hurricanes are going to come along. They happen. In Texas, we knew there's going to be a winter storm like that sooner or later. And there are things you can do to prepare for them so they're not so devastating when they happen, but we just didn't do those things. which is frustrating. Hopefully this bill will help us fix some of those things. We just don't know yet.
It has been a long time coming, hasn't it? I mean, people have been talking about the need for infrastructure investment in the US, major infrastructure investment, for a long time.
Yes, this is nothing new. And when Americans travel to other countries, sometimes we're embarrassed to see their airports and subways and trains and all these things that run so well and are so beautiful and clean. We don't have that here. We have other things, I guess. We have advantages. It's not like we're going anywhere, but there's so much more we could do. Those things are they are economically problematic because they slow down transportation, they slow down trade, they prevent people from getting places efficiently. All that adds up. Ships are stuck. Dozens of ships are anchored right now outside the port of Los Angeles, sometimes for weeks, because there's no place for them to dock. So somebody in the United States is waiting on some parts that are on one of those ships, and they're not able to make their products. So all that is a problem, and we need to work on it.
We saw also with the remnants of Hurricane Ida hitting New York, we saw the dramatic TV footage of water pouring into the subway, which I'm sure you saw as well, and quite a bit of talk about the impact of climate change. Now, is this infrastructure bill going to specifically look at climate change, or is that still a bit of a partisan issue in the US?
Well, that is, Biden and the Democrats certainly want it to. That is something the Republicans aren't keen on. So that explains why they're splitting this into two bills. That one, they know that the Republicans will support, and one they know they won't. But yes, in my view, climate change certainly is a problem. We're seeing the effects of it in the crazy weather we have, in the fires and hurricanes and buildings falling. That condominium tower that fell in Florida recently. These things are slowly adding up, and the insurance industry is starting to see it. So that, I think, is probably where the final motivation is going to come from, because at some point, property insurers are going to say, no, we're not going to insure your building that is below sea level anymore, because that's not a good risk for us. So that may be what forces the issue finally.
Well, look, Patrick, I think that's probably a good point at which to wrap up.